Welcome back to the pop culture discussion. I am your host, Robert, and today we are reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. When one of the Guardians' past comes back for revenge, the crew face off against their most personal threat yet. With escalating threats putting the galaxy at stake, once again, it is time for the Guardians to do what they do best one last time. The source material continues to be brought to life with spectacular results. These Guardian movies do not play it safe. There are so many insane references and Easter eggs pulled straight from the comics that are just insanely crazy. Most of these are creatively entertaining. A few of them are definitely a bit silly and didn't quite land for me, but most of these are fantastic. All of the new characters, both good and bad, introduced in these movies are all welcome additions, already adding to such a stacked cast of characters that we already love. The emotional character arcs are better than ever, with confronting character origins and unexpected moments. The darker themes and scenes of this movie create some real shocking moments and some heart-wrenching flashbacks for certain characters. The performances and writing for these scenes are top quality and definitely some of the best we have ever seen in this series. Rocket Raccoon, Star-Lord, and Groot were absolutely the highlights for me in this movie. A huge part of the story of this movie is dedicated to Rocket's past, and a huge part of this movie is dedicated to Star-Lord trying to move forward with all of the trauma that has happened to him from the previous films. And Groot was just a highlight because this is absolutely my favorite version of Groot yet. Every single time we've seen Groot in the MCU, he has been completely different in each movie. We have seen the original Groot, we've seen baby Groot, we've seen teenage Groot, and then this is another adult Groot. And it's just the creativity of his character in this and the way that he is used in the action sequences that make him so much fun to watch. Speaking of action sequences as well, not only does this movie have the best action in any of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, it has some of the best action in the MCU. There is one scene in particular that is easily top 5 action sequences in the MCU for me. The action is way more brutal here than I expected, to the point where I don't know if it's too violent for kids. With the combination of the more brutal violence and the darker themes and scenes here, this is definitely a hard recommendation for children, because there might be a few scenes here that very well could be nightmare fuel for younger children. The CGI continues to be incredible. I don't know how they come up with some of these set pieces. The science fiction elements, spectacular cinematography, and just such a wide variety of colors and elements pulled straight from the comics make for such an amazing movie to look at. There were a few practical effects that looked a little rough. It was super obvious that was someone in a costume or that was a puppet or whatnot. But when it came to the CGI, most of this movie was absolutely flawless, which is, I can't believe I'm saying this, a nice surprise from the MCU. Considering the CGI of recent previous MCU movies have taken quite a hard hit in certain scenes, I can gladly say there wasn't a single one of those scenes in this movie, and all of it just looked fantastic. As expected, there's another absolutely banging soundtrack to this film. Not only are the songs extremely catchy and some are actually quite emotional, but they relate to the characters when you listen to the lyrics and look up what these songs are. They absolutely loop in with the storytelling and the character arcs, which makes the music hit so much harder than it already does. And the villain here is so despicably evil. He is one of those love-to-hate villains. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 has a very emotionally satisfying ending for this crew of characters, with multiple storylines looping back to previous films, and especially the first Guardians of the Galaxy. There are absolutely sad parts here, but there are also extremely happy moments. It's a great roller coaster ride of emotions. This movie isn't flawless though. I know a lot of people, especially on TikTok, are saying it's one of the greatest MCU movies of all time. It's really good, but it's definitely got some flaws. I found that the first half of the movie feels like it has almost no direction. There was literally a scene about halfway through the movie, I was like, oh, okay, this is where they're going. This is the goal. This is what the team is here to do. Everything is making sense now. Moving forward, I enjoyed the movie a lot more. Not to say that the first half was bad, but things were just kind of happening. And then there was a segment of the movie that happens kind of after the opening action sequence that was by far some of the silliest science fiction world building I've ever seen in these movies, to the point where the world building and costumes and scenery of this scene was so silly that it pulled out all the seriousness of this scene. And there were action sequences happening and a main character that almost dies. But because this scene was so silly, I just couldn't take any of it seriously. And I just found myself thinking they had better not kill this character off in such a stupid scene. And this segment goes for like a solid 10 to 15 minutes. And it's easily the weakest part in the movie for me. I know these movies are known for being comedies, and unfortunately, almost none of the jokes landed for me here. There are plenty of jokes here, and I did laugh a handful of times, but there were so many times where a character would throw a joke out and you could tell in classic MCU fashion, they paused for a hot second for the audience to react, and it was dead silence at the cinema. It was a packed cinema and people weren't laughing at the jokes, so it wasn't just me. And I know a lot of the jokes is just the team kind of bullying each other, but at the same time, a huge part of this movie are characters almost dying and the team freaking out and trying to save each other throughout the film. But then when they're not in those situations, they are frequently bullying each other. I know it's just banter, but at the same time, the bullying is kind of cruel. So that made me think, do these guys actually like each other or not? Because they're always trying to save each other, but when they're not doing that, they're just ripping into each other. So all of that banter type comedy didn't land for me. There was also some childish humor here, which didn't land for me either, which didn't really make any sense being in this movie, considering how dark and violent it is. It absolutely felt like an adult film, but this childish humor was here. So I don't know why. None of that humor landed for me. There was some slapstick humor that was good, and the humor that related to the world building was also pretty funny. But yeah, like I said, I think about 80% of these jokes just didn't land. So I find this by far the least funny of the three Guardians of the Galaxy movies. In saying all that, because of the incredibly emotional character beats and epic science fiction action that was way better than the first two Guardians movies in my opinion, this is still an extremely entertaining MCU movie. If you love the first two Guardians of the Galaxy movies, or you love the Avengers movies, you're absolutely going to love this one. But like I said earlier, maybe leave your kids at home for this one if you were planning on taking your family. The heavier themes and more graphic side of the violence definitely doesn't make this movie kid-friendly, but for teenagers and adults like myself, you're absolutely gonna love this one. It's a very satisfying conclusion to these characters. So for me, it is a solid 9 out of 10. Thank you for watching my Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 review. Do you agree with my review? Or do you think this movie is a 10 out of 10? I've heard a lot of people say it's one of the best MCU movies and it's easily a 10 out of 10. I think my 9 out of 10 is justified with all the flaws I've just given it. But hey, if this is one of your favorites, I'm glad you see this as a flawless movie. Thank you for watching my review, and I will see you in my next video.